We are especially I'm happy to introduce Charles this morning, Charles Ennis. Charles, if you don't already know, is the first vice president of the National RASC. And if all goes well on Sunday, will become our president. And is a member of the Sunshine Coast. And for me, that's just a gorgeous ferry ride across from Vancouver Island over to the Sunshine Coast where he lives. During the pandemic, I don't know about the rest of you, but I was a bit of a slug and didn't do all that much. But Charles decided that he was going to do well more than that, and that he started a project that he was looking at different asterisms around the world and to see where he could go with this. And as Robin said this morning, it kind of blew up into this absolutely magnificent project that he has taken on. And I'm really happy to introduce Charles this morning, and I'm going to let him go on ahead. You can introduce a little bit more of this, Charles, if you'd like to, and go on ahead with it. I just wanted to ask, Charles, are you more comfortable with having people ask questions in the chat, and then go from there?
Yeah, I can. I mean, it's fine. We can have people ask questions as we are going along, and if you like, I'll see what I can do with that.
Yeah, well, we can have a look. If please, if you'd like to ask a question in the middle of the presentation, put your hand up in the reactions, and we'll see if we can make sure that you get your questions asked. And then otherwise there'll be some time at the end. We have lots of time because this is an hour session. We have a little bit more time than some of the others. Okay, go ahead, Charles.
Right. Thank you. And I'd like to welcome everybody from wherever in the world they are coming from. And I would like to, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, respectfully acknowledge that I am living and observing on the unceded lands of the Seashell First Nation. And this project is dedicated to a dear friend who we lost far too early, Nairn Robertson, whose parents are from the Seashell and Lillooet Nations. He had a terminal disease. That telescope you see there, he got from the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And when he was with us, he was an inspiration. He was courageous. His favorite expression you see there was be confident, be strong, be thankful. This is for you, man. Okay. Welcome to the launch of the World Asterisms Project, which today is 1 year and 4 days old. And very briefly, if you want to know, how did I decide to get involved in this? I broke my shoulder walking the dog. Come see me in Gathertown later, I'll explain it. But basically that meant I had a lot of time on my hands I could spend in front of the computer. And I had already been studying sky cultures from around the world and teaching classes on this. And also I have been introduced to telescopic asterisms by this gentleman here, which is Danny Skolzeski, one of our best volunteers in the Sunshine Coast Center. That's one of his favorites up there, Grouchy's cluster, the coat hanger. And if you're new to asterisms, what an asterism is basically is a star or group of stars that have been identified and named. So what I did is I went out there to see if there were any world asterisms lists, and there have been some books described as definitive in the past, like R.H. Allen's Star Names and John Hill's Urania, Complete View of the Heavens. But they basically focused on this half of the world. It introduced a few stars in the southern sky, didn't talk about any cultures in the southern sky. And when I looked for telescopic asterism lists from most of the clubs and societies out there, they were lists that were created by old white guys with telescopes and a few token white females. So I went, you know what? You look at textbooks on astronomy, and there's very little in most of those that have anything to do with sky cultures. So I went back to the Inclusivity and Diversity Committee, and I'm a co-founder of that. And I said, you know what? We welcome world cultures here, but what we really need to do is celebrate them. And I think a way to do that is to create a world asterisms list. And almost immediately, some people that heard that I was doing this got a hold of me and said, do you have any idea what you're getting into here? Are you crazy? Like, do you? And I went, no, actually, but I found out pretty quickly. And when I did, my reaction was this, because, hey, I'm a retired detective. This is detective work. And this time people aren't running at me with guns and knives. And I think that's an advantage, actually. So how many different cultures have we examined in the last year? Over 400. And how many asterisms do we have at this time? We have 8,908, including 305 names in the Milky Way. Now, very early on, some people said, how on earth can you view them all? Because I think they thought we were creating an observing program here. And in fact, one of them said, do you realize this is cultural? And I went, yes, congratulations, you get a gold star. That's exactly what this is. But I'll tell you what, I can show you a small group of stars that is plows, wagons, wains, carriages, carts, chariots, wheels, bears being chased by hunters or animal predators, elk, camel, bison, bulls, lizards, caribou, herons, coyotes, wolves, four legs of bulls, loons, oxen, otters, broody hens with chicks, crustaceans, rabbit nets, salmon weir, backsides of snakes, big-headed men, revolving men, men shot for stealing snares, thieves, lost hunters, shepherds, oxards, birth women, blue women, brothers, sisters, girls, boys, gods, sons, godmothers, grandfathers, spirits, Buddhists, sages, boats, rowboats, canoes, rudders, canes, buckets, dippers, ladles, saucepans, butchers, cleavers, cactus hooks, cradles, bows and arrows, fishers, shields, and a rat. And it's all the same 7 stars. And I know you've seen these, people. That's the Big Dipper. Okay. This is about dealing with terra nullius, lands belonging to God, and the doctrine of discovery, which is a series of papal bulls that were used to justify going out into the world, conquering lands, and subjugating the people. And it was actually 5 days ago that renowned First Nations celebrity Buffy St. Clair was on, St. Marie, I should say, was on CBC National talking about this. And this is what was directly behind institutions like the residential schools, which were all about erasing culture. And we don't need to go into the horrors of that there. We were introduced to some of that in the opening remarks yesterday by Dr. Robert Cardinal. We'll just leave it there. So 7,000 world languages, and in your children's lifetime, half of them are going to probably disappear. And you're maybe thinking, well, okay, thank you in another language is still thank you, right? What's the difference? Cultures are the foundations of knowledge. And key concepts and ways of seeing the world will disappear with those language, as will their sky cultures. And it relates to the difficulty in translating words accurately into other languages, which is one of the big challenges we have in this project. And to give you an example, that's New Zealand, beautiful country. And that word there, whenua, is from the Maori iwi, and it means land, country, ground, terrain, and placenta. Let that sink in for a sec. The land that gives me birth, the land that nourishes me. The Maori were amazing navigators who used stars to go across thousands of miles of open ocean when my ancestors were afraid to leave the coastline because they thought the world was flat and we're going to sail over the edge. And they also used it as a calendar to indicate when their planting and harvesting seasons were. And there is a Maori sky, and absolutely everything up there has to do with navigation and weather, and I'll come back to that boat just a little bit later. There's the standard southern sky. There's the same sky as viewed by the Maori. Tama Rareti is a great warrior in Maori stories. The Tara o Tuiwaka o Tama Rareti is the rope of Tama Rareti's canoe, or the rope of Te Punga. What's Te Punga? It's the Southern Cross, Taki o Tahi. This beautiful picture by Gerald Gload, who's a Mi'kmaq artist, is basically sums up everything that we're doing here. Everything that is down here is up there. Everybody puts their world, their culture in the sky, and then you can imagine someone standing by a campfire and pointing at the sky and telling these stories. This is about perspectives, it's about ancient science, and it's about inspiration. And what we're using in this program is two-eyed seeing, which is a learning concept which was created by Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall in 2004. And I learned of this from the Halifax Center of the RASC, who has been using this in their partnership with Mi'kmaq First Nations to recover their skies. And it is a way of comparing the two different perspectives to come up with a greater perspective. It's a beautiful technique in reconciliation. So perspectives depend on where you are, okay? In the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere, generally Orion is depicted as a hunter or typically a male, sometimes a female in some cultures. But in equatorial regions where when it comes up, the stars of the belt are perpendicular to the horizon, they normally see it as a plow or a spring trap or all kinds of other things. So it's about cultures. This is an Australian sky. Golgotha, over there you see Ugarilia, which is a group of women, and there's their elder sister Kambaguda, who's guarding them with a group of dingo puppies from Niruna, who is a hunter, and he gets angry, and his hand, which is Betelgeuse, starts to glow. It's a variable star, because he's going to throw magic at them, and every so often, Aldebaran starts to glow because Kambaguda is kicking his magic back at him. This story is thousands of years old, and it proves that they were aware of variable stars. Weather prediction systems. This is an Inuit sky, and that star down there flickering is Sirius. And when it flickered, they knew that there was bad weather coming. And this is directly related to seeing, which means turbulence in the sky. Amateur astronomers know all about this, but all over the world, you find examples of this in the sky where people were using this as a weather prediction system. I mentioned navigation systems a moment ago. This is the Hawaiian sky. This is the Boneback Lizard, which is one of their 4 major star lines. There is the zenith star for Hawaii, Hokulea. If that is directly overhead, you're close to Hawaii. And there are 2 star lines that indicate north-south, and there's 2 on each side of this asterism, because if it's rising or setting, you can still see your directional line. Here's another one. It's called the Kite of Coelho from the Hawaiian culture, and every single one of those 4 stars in that kite, which is of course the Great Square, if you're a Western astronomer, is also named for a prominent ancestor. And you see Cassiopeia there is the frigate bird. This chart is from an ancient Tang Dynasty document, which was comparing their astrology to Hellenistic astrology and Vedic or Indian astrology. So you will find that all over the place as they're part of their divination systems. Deities, all of these cultures put their deities in the sky. This is a Babylonian example. You see the great god Ea. Calendars, they didn't have a calendar they hang on the wall. They looked at the stars to figure out what time it was and whether it was time to plant or harvest or whatever, and they built structures to assist them in doing that. The oldest collection is a cave ceiling in Armenci, Spain, which is between 12 and 14,000 years old. We have records that go back 2,000 years for Babylonian, Assyrian, and Akkadian skies, and they're not comprehensive or authoritative or complete. There's all kinds of variations depending on the region that they come from, but there's an awful lot of views of the sky. Same thing if you go to China, you have ox, scapulae, and turtle plastrons going back thousands of years. You have star maps that are quite detailed, as you see here, going back thousands of years. And the Chinese have up to 300 Xinguans in the sky, depending on which dynasty you're looking at. And this is a really clear example of that. What is happening down here is up there because they put everything up in the sky. Go to Stellarium and check it out. It's unbelievable. Koreans, very similar. Now, this may give you the impression that it's all stick figures, okay? And some early civilizations did do this, and we inherited these in a lot of our modern. But you know what? It isn't just stick figures. For example, you can go up there right now, and there's all kinds of open clusters like this one, NGC 2301, or nebula, which have been named and renamed over the centuries as people looked at them and said, you know what that looks like. In this particular case, this is in Monoceros. It was discovered by William Herschel in 1786, and it was named for English astronomer Ralph Copeland, who you see up in the corner there, because he called it the golden worm. He meant a dragon when he meant worm in the Norse sense. But then later it became known as the Great Bird Cluster because somebody thought it looks like a seabird. But then along came fans of J.K. Rowling, and it became Hagrid's dragon. I like that one personally. This is about single star asterisms, where every star is a character in a greater story, which is a group of stars. This is how you typically see asterisms depicted in African skies. So, for example, in several parts of Africa, you have a story where this star, Aldebaran in the Hyades, is a god or a great hunter whose wives are over here. It's the Pleiades. And they say, get out there and do some hunting. He goes to the 3 stars of the belt of Orion, which is 3 zebras, 3 gazelles, several different types of game. He shoots his arrow, it falls short. That's the sword of Orion. And he's embarrassed because he can't retrieve it because the lion, Betelgeuse, is in ambush. There are dark asterisms. If you look at the Milky Way from the northern hemisphere, you're looking out of our galaxy. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you're looking into it towards the center, and there are all these dust clouds that are used by people like the Inca as constellations. These Inca skies, there are only 2 stars in this. Those 2 there, that's Alpha and Beta Centauri, which are the eyes of the mother llama and her baby llama there. Here's another example from Australian skies, the emu. It appears in multiple sky cultures and dreamlines in Australian culture, but it appears as a rhea in South America, and an ostrich in Africa. Now, this may give you the impression that what we're trying to do is go back to a time, a golden age, when everybody in that age saw exactly the same thing in the sky. Yeah, that's never happened ever in human history. I'm going to give you well, first of all, the example is if you go to Stellarium, you'll see that the default is called Western, and it's the IAU stick figures for this guy. But you see there's 3 other choices there, and they're all different. And you may say, well, okay, Ptolemy gave us 48 constellations, didn't he? I mean, isn't that how his people saw the sky? Well, one of those, this is what we call Auriga today. He called it Antiochus, which means the rain holder. But you have to understand, in his time, they were absolutely mad about chariot racing. They were fanatical about it. They had factions, they had teams, they had riots, they had gambling. It was a big, big deal. And they named that constellation for every single one of those charioteers, real, mythological, divine, every inventor of harness, every inventor of any type of biga or quadriga. And Ptolemy knew this because it was happening in his time. Depending on what region you were in, there was a different name. So really, Antiochus is kind of a cover of them all sort of a thing. And from the 13th to the 19th century, notable astronomers frequently created new constellations, and often these were to honor royalty because that was their patron who was paying for their research, and they wanted to keep that happening, right? But the problem was that we're making discoveries and we're trying to share them, and everybody had a different map. There was no standard map. It was crazy. And so ultimately in 1922, the International Astronomical Union said, that's it, no more. We're making a permanent sky here, 88 standard constellations, that it. And then 8 years later, they went, and we're putting borders between them. Stop doing that. We want to have one sky. So what I want to do now is quickly show you 2 pieces of the sky, just to give you an idea of all the different things that are up there. And I'm going to start with Leo. The stars from this constellation appear in 276 of the 8,900 asterisms. So not one of the busiest ones, but it's up there. And you see it's viewed from the side, okay? That's the way Ptolemy showed us. You see he's got ears on this one. And that star there is Regulus, which is the brightest star in the constellation, which he called the Princelet, which led to a Romanization that led to the modern name, Regulus. But it was also known to them as Herculeus because Hercules had 12 leaders, and one of them was telling us the Nemean lion, and so this was seen as commemorating it. There are other names in that culture. Previously in Babylon, it was the Urgurlu demon. If you were in ancient Egypt, it was a knife or a sickle. If you were in the Chinese sky, it's this dragon Zuanyuan here. There's where Leo is. You can see there are all kinds of different pieces there that are part of the Supreme Palace enclosure. And the whole sky is divided up into enclosures that depict everything in everyday life at that time. If you're Romanian or you're Basque, it's a horse. If you're Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, it's Osseti, the fireplace. And I'm going to come back to that sacred hoop a little bit later. That's where Leo is. Ancient Mayans, that star is Regulus, and they called it the single star, and they had that little triangle down there that they called death, but that's where Leo would be today. If you're Ojibwe or Anishinaabe, it's the great panther and the curly tail. There's where Leo is. The front of it is the curly tail. If you're Wardaman down in Australia, it is the creation dog. If you're Barasana, it's the crayfish. And if you're Arabic, It's Al-Assad. Now, I'm giving you this picture deliberately because this pretty much depicts how they see it in the sky, which is from above, which is very common in Arabic culture. And it is made up of multiple constellations. The mane of the lion is one of their manzil, or lunar stations, Al-Zubra. The forehead is another one called Al-Gaba. So here it is. That back leg sticking out, that is stars going into Lynx and Ursa Major. There is the front paw, which is Castor and Pollux and Gemini. There's the other front paw, which is Sirius and Mersam and Canis Major. That nose there is right in the middle of Cancer. Now we're starting to get into the lion with the eyes, the forehead, and the mane, those two being the manzil I just mentioned, the lunar stations. The star of weather change is a star they use to indicate change from rainy and dry seasons. The back end of the line is in Virgo, and the tassel there, that is calendar 256 or Malat 111, which is an open cluster, like that. Go to the other end of the line, Messier 44 is the nose. And actually they have two names for it, which if you translate them, one of those is nose hairs, and the other one is the sneeze. So every time I look at Messier 44, I don't see the beehive, I see the sneeze there. And the other constellation I want to show you is Taurus. And this one is the top of the hit parade for stars that appear in other parts of the world because it's got the Hyades and the Pleiades here. And you'll see that it's the front half of the bull, and that's exactly how Ptolemy drew it. And it's basically how it showed up in earlier Babylonian skies, where it was the bull of heaven and the Pleiades is the seven gods. In Egyptian skies, it was just the jaw, the Hyades, and the flock, and we're not sure what kind of birds those were. But that jaw, keep that in mind, because that keeps showing up all over the world. In Vedic or Indian skies, originally Orion was a deer's head and Taurus was the climber, but then Hellenistic and Persian influence pushed them in the direction of starting to draw it the way the Greeks did. But if you're Belarusian, the Hyades is a pair of grass snakes, and the Pleiades is a hen and chicks, and that is an asterism you're going to see all over Eastern Europe, and you're going to see it several times coming up here. Going down to Australia, the Burong people saw the Pleiades cluster as the Larnankirk, which is the young girls, and the Hyades is Gellerac, which means rose cockatoo, but it's not a bird, it's a man named Rose Cockatoo who's playing music, and the girls are dancing to it. You can see there's a kangaroo there too. Different part of Australia, Kamilaroi, Ualahi, the Pleiades is the Mie, young girls. The Hyades is a Hut, and Aldebaran is Old Filler, the old wise man, and the Orion is the young uninitiated boys, and Old Filler is guarding the young girls from those boys. Chinese skies, the Hyades is a net, as you can see there, and the Pleiades is a hairy head. And if you look at the Korean sky, the star lines are virtually identical, but they have different names. Hyades is a general, the border. Pleiades is the ear and the eye of the sky. The Japanese did not have as extensive skies as the Chinese and Koreans did, but they did have lunar stations, and you can see, like the Chinese, they have a net for the Hyades, but the Pleiades is the stopping place. There is that sacred hoop from the Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota skies again, and there is the Hyades, which is the buffalo embryo, and there is the seven girls, which is the Pleiades. In Hawaiian skies, Hokulea or Okula is the red star, which of course it is, and the chief size is what the Pleiades are called, Matariki. If you go to Tongan skies, you can see it's Mataliki. It's one of those repeating asterisms all over Oceania, and the Hyades has become pigeon perch. Now, I showed you briefly this in the Maori skies earlier. The Pleiades is the foam at the front of Tainui's canoe. The Hyades is the sail, and Tautaro, the three stars of the belt of Orion, are the glittering waters going off the back of his boat. If you Inuit, the Hyades is the dogs, and the Pleiades is the breastbone. If you're Sami, another northern people, the Pleiades is a pack of dogs, but the Hyades, they didn't have a name for that. Lakono, there's that jaw. It's a jaw of a tapir, in this case, for the Hyades. They just called the Pleiades a score of stars. Macedonians, the constellation Orion became a plowman, a plow, and oxen. In the farmyard, there is a fox stalking the pigs. That's the Hyades. And there's that mother hen and the chicks again. Your Vanuatu is a tweezer for holding hot stones for the Hyades, and the Pleiades is young boys or young girls. The Tucano, Hyades is a grill to cook fish, and the Pleiades is a group of stars. If you Tupigawani, the constellation Orion has become an old man, and the belt is actually a splint because he's walking with a stick, and his head is the Hyades, and the feather decorating his cap is the Pleiades, but they also call the Hyades a taper's jaw. There it is again. And the Pleiades, in some parts of their region, it is the 7 bees, and other parts, it's the wasp nest. Ancient Mayans called the Hyades Kulti, the owl, and the Pleiades were the cobird. Ancient Norse skies, it's the wolf's mouth, and the cluck hen. There is the hen with her chicks again. Siberians would call that Pleiades cluster a duck's nest. Sardinians, the Hyades, Aldebaran is the bunch's driver. The bunch is the Pleiades, it's a bunch of animals that he's driving, and the Hyades is his hut. Now, if you're Arabic, Aldebaran, which is where we get the name for Alpha Tauri, is the follower, and he has camels and some dogs with him. So there's Aldebaran, there's the dogs, there's the camels. And what is he following? The Pleiades, Althariah. Who's Althariah? The little abundant one. It's a very ancient name, and we're not entirely sure of the meaning, but we do know it's a female diminutive. We do know it is a term of endearment. It's made up of the stars of 3 constellations, and she is depicted from above, like all of these others I've been showing you. So you're looking down to the top of her head, and her arms encompass all of the lucky or auspicious stars in the sky, which indicate when they're going to have water and food. It's a seasonal thing. And it represents her role as a mediator between east and west, rich and poor, abundance and famine, light and dark. So here she is. There's the top of her head, the Pleiades. There's her henna tinted hand. There's the leper's hand. That arm is a little shorter. Let's look at that upper arm. You see there's all kinds of globular clusters and nebula around here. There's all kinds of abundance and things to see. And let's zoom in on that hand there. That's Cassiopeia, the bent W of Cassiopeia. And if you're not sure what a henna tinted hand is, that's what it is, just like that. Also, if you look at the wrist, which is the double cluster, if you're a amateur astronomer in the West, they consider that to be the tattooed wrist. Now, if you go down to the other side, you'll see there isn't a lot of clusters. There isn't a lot to see. This is abundance on one side, want on the other. It's that balance thing. But there is something down there. Messier 77 is sort of a ring on one finger right there. Now, you may be asking, how inclusive are we? Like, how far have we taken this? Well, for example, we have the stars of Middle Earth in there from the works of English writer, poet, philologist, and academic J.R.R. Tolkien and his Lord of the Rings and others. He mentions them in his books and in his notes. And there you see Corona Borealis, that's Durin's crown. So what exactly did we end up in the end? We have got a handbook, 855 pages with 8,908 asterisms. We have a second volume, which is a table, both as a PDF and an Excel spreadsheet, 446 pages. This is basically where you get your information like right ascension and declination if you want it. The handbook describes in detail all the star lines, or as much detail as we're able to get, and any history that we have on who we named them and why they were named. There is also this list of names of the Milky Way. And volume 3 is where we name all of the cultures involved and direct you to all the different resources written and online that you can access to get more information on these cultures. And I should note that we list all of these by subject and not by culture. We don't want to silo these cultures. We want to show very clearly how these themes and these subjects cross cultures. Now, what about the sun, moon, and planets? I mean, they definitely show up in the sky cultures, the storylines, the dreamlines of all these cultures. And you know what? This is asterisms, stars. And for the time being, because we're focusing on that. We haven't gotten any solar system objects at this time. We do have the information sort of squirreled away. And I do at some point in the future, as things slow down, hopefully that won't be too far from now, we will probably create another additional list that has got those. So you can now check out all of these asterisms on our national website at that link, or you can just go to the front home page of the RESC website, use the search box for World Asterisms Project, and you will find all of those files ready to be downloaded. Now, this is a living project. People are still naming things up there, and we are still doing research with all of the people who have partnered with us to recover lost cultures and preserve this stuff. We are caretakers, we are stewards of this. And this is what my inbox looks like right now. I mean, 30 minutes after I announced the initial launch to the researchers we're working with, hey, it's now live online, I got one of the South African researchers writing to me saying, congratulations, here's an appended list with even more. So yeah, this isn't done. So in the first year, we had 31 drafts uploaded to the World Asterisms Project Google Drive. We have a drive where we share information with researchers. If you're a student or a researcher and you want the cutting edge stuff, as we're putting it out there, that's where you need to be. I'll give you the contact information to get a hold of me in a minute. We had 3 major edits of between 2 and 5 weeks each, where we went to look for, omissions and grammatical errors, but also now we got new stuff in there. Let's see if there's more connections. We always found them. And we're already on version 2022.5 because we've done a couple of test loads and we've added stuff even since that initial test load. Now, since I started this project, I've had several people contact me and say, I found this asterism, which I think is kind of neat, and would you like to have it? And the answer is yes. Get that thing to me. Give me the write a sentence declination. Give me a sketch. Give me a picture. Let me add you, because we already have a whole lot of RESC members who have contributed to this, like David Levy, like Randy Pecan, like Roland Deshane, who I think is out there listening to me right now, like Dr. Lucien Kemble, Father Lucien Kemble. So yeah, we absolutely are interested in that. So if you want to contact us, there is a email that was created for the site. It's on the page. You don't have to take a picture of this. It's go to the page, you'll find it. If you're a member of the Sunshine Coast Center, which is what I belong to, you can go to info@coastastronomy.ca, and you can also get me at my personal email address right there. And so I'm going to stop sharing here. I'm going to see if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Every time I have seen this, and I think this is now number 3, because we've already had Charles give presentations to the Victoria Center, is every time I see that, I find something else that I didn't, that went by me the first time, and that was able to do that. We've got lots of time for questions, and I just wonder if anybody's got anything just first up, just so you can put your hand up and we can, Judy, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yeah, just did. Thank you. Hi, Charles.
Hey,
Obviously, this project is taking some time and a lot of effort. Do you see there ever being an end to the collecting process and potentially having hard copy production of your results?
you're not the first person to suggest that. It was suggested in very early days because, of course, I've written a book on small observatories and on solar observing for the RESCs. But it's growing very rapidly still. There is still a great deal of information. Seriously, that is what my inbox looks like. And that is part of it. I mean, it's a huge document, so it would be an expensive document. And yeah, you could see it maybe as a reference text for a university library or something like that. And I'm sure you could find a publisher that might want to do that. But essentially, this is about welcoming the world and celebrating, and that's what the Inclusivity and Diversity Committee is about. And the RESC is about public education. So at the moment, we're inclined to put it out there and share it with the world so that researchers can and everybody else can use it. But, you know, at some point in the future, when it slows down, that is a possibility. We're thinking about it. And I mean, you could use it to raise funds for the project, but the costs are minimal, and primarily sweat equity, and people like Trevor or Lehman from Australia, who's with us today, have been, you know, their research team contributed their entire list of Australian asterisms, and we've just had so many different people putting time and effort into this from so many different places. So, you know, I mean, right now we're inclined to share it for free, but we may go there.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else that has a question? Or you can put it in the chat as well, if you'd like to.
You can put it in the chat. I mean, I know some people have asked me, what are the principal challenges in this? And the first one is actually trust, because we are dealing with First Nations people who have been subjected to the corrosive effects of colonialism by people who look sort of like me. And if you don't know me and what I'm about, of course, you're probably not going to trust me at first. And we are hoping that this project will encourage people to get further involved. John McDonald, who's been working for 19 years on Inuit skies, is now working with their elders for them to take charge of their skies so that we can now direct people to them as the knowledge keepers. We have just recently entered into negotiations and talks with Dr. Robert Cardinal, who is our opening presenter yesterday, to help him research Blackfoot skies. And Dr. Shindan Pete from the Salish Nation, who teaches at UBC, has just had some meetings with me and is very excited about collaborating on gathering information on Salish skies. So that is a long, hard process that involves the two-eyed seeing, respect, and patience, and we are working on that. But I mean, you know, elders are dying, so we need to get on this. Second issue is language, dialects, and translations. I could probably say mistranslations. That's a challenge. I mentioned that earlier. And the third, and it's not as big as the others, but it is the thing, is ethnoastronomers who can't read a star chart. And specifically the Bayer classification system, which is of course where Johann Bayer from back in 1603 decided, I'm going to take the principal stars, give them each a Greek letter in order of magnitude. And you look at a star chart now as an amateur and you see that letter, and you go, let me find the table to figure out what bloody letter that is. In our handbook, every time I mention Bayer classification, if it says alpha in brackets behind it, is the Greek letter. You don't have to look it up. We made it easy. But it's funny how many ethnoastronomers mistake a gamma, which kind of looks like this, with a lambda, which kind of looks like this. So, yeah.
Roland?
Yes, Charles, excellent work. And I'm so pleased that you incorporated my one little tiny asterism into it. But I just want to exhort to the audience here that you can contribute to this project yourself. Charles is obviously looking at the big picture, many large-scale asterism and constellation-like patterns. What I provided to Charles was something that I stumbled upon in my 100 by 25 or 25 by 100 binoculars, a asterism that looked like a little flying saucer seen edge on. Many times when we observe, we see these small-scale features, and some of them are worth noting. So if you are aware of things like that, there is a niche for that type of observation in this project. And like I said, I'm tickled pink to have my little flying saucer asterism in this monster list of worldwide asterisms. But you too can have that a little glow of pride that you contributed something as well, if you've run across something that you've seen.
Thank you, Roland. I should mention, all of the observing programs are the responsibility of our observing committee, which has been with us forever and does excellent work. They have fabulous programs. I've completed most of them, working on the rest, but they are not at the moment working on a telescopic asterisms list. It just doesn't seem to be on their priorities right now, which is fine. They've got their own priorities. And I'm not going to put a list of telescopic asterisms on our World Asterisms page, because that's not where an observing program goes. But if you are a major fan of telescopic asterisms, or maybe you're from somewhere else in the world and you'd like to start a program for your own club, or you just want to add to your own list, in the big list, all of the telescopic asterisms have subject titles that are bold. Don't waste your time going through there trying to pick them all out of 8,900. Email me. I'd be happy to share you the list. I've already got it. So yeah.
Charles, I'll get to you just in a minute, Kareem. T. Irvin has asked, are there any cultures in the world that you haven't been able to get sky information for?
Yes. Well, I mean, I've already given you an example. Dr. Shington Peak is talking to me about Salish, and we are at the stage now where they have some, but they're not ready to share it yet because they're just figuring out how much they trust what we're doing here. Also, you are running into situations where within the culture, there are clans. And I mean, it isn't a matter of just sharing it outside of the nation. They don't share within clans. It's initiatory. So you have to be very careful with this. We don't want to tell the stories. It's not our story to tell. We're directing people to First Nations to do that. We have funded Mi'kmaq and the Halifax Center to produce YouTube videos on their skies, which you can see online. We are selling planispheres at head office that you can get at the RAC website on Innuit, Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, and Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota skies, and we're planning to expand those. But yeah, there are all kinds of cultures out there where we have not yet got information. Africa is a really good example. We have it. The information is pretty sparse. People haven't been out there talking to all the different people involved. And so it's a scramble to grab this stuff before, it gets lost forever. But I want to tell you very quickly about the Hawaiians, because they lost most of their skies. They lost many of their people from disease. But in 1976, the Polynesian Voyaging Society got together and created a replica voyaging canoe, and they went looking for a navigator to help them figure out how to use the stars again. And they found a Sac-Malese navigator named Mal Peeler. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And Mal said, you know what, same stars, I'll show you how to use them. But you know what, go look at the other cultures, Tongan, Maori, Anatan. It's a similar language. They have similar skies. You'll find some of yours there. You'll get some of it back. But if you can't, come up with a new name. Give it a new name. It's your sky. Call it whatever you want. So the modern name for Orion is the cat's cradle, because that's a very popular game that you do with strings with children. And that's what they call that now. And they actually took Kochab, which is Beta Ursae minoris, right in the corner of the little lipper bucket there, and they called it Constant Mal to honor him. So yeah, people are still naming skies. People are still recovering skies. It's the World Asterisms Project in 2019 assigned a star to each country in the world and said, come up with a name for us. And we got hundreds of new names out of that. So it's still happening. It's still growing.
Kareem, you have a question?
Yeah, Charles, fantastic work putting all of this together and bringing the researchers in, which is fantastic. But my question is a little bit along what Eric has posted as well in the chat is, when I've been doing the two-eyed seeing talks, one of the things that we have to be very careful of is which asterisms and which stories you can share at which times of the year. And you mentioned the Dakota Lakota, which I was very concerned when I saw that star wheel, because I know the Navajo as well as the Dakota Lakota, when they did the Native Skywatchers webinars on two-eyed seeing, they were very specific that there were parts that they didn't want recorded because those stories shouldn't be told if those stars are not up in the sky.
Right. So
what I'm wondering is, will our database change what's visible according to what's up in the sky so that we respect those cultures and that urge not to share the stories at the wrong time?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you framed it. It's what we're doing in the handbook is saying we're the astronomer part. These are the stars. This is the name. These are the stars. And here's where you go for the story, and you go to the Diné, the Navajo, and they give you the story. Okay, I mean, the Navajo publish a a book on Navajo skies that I've got on the shelf behind me, which tells you all about their skies, but it also tells you, and we don't talk about these at this particular time of year, you know, this sort of thing. There are ways of doing this, and what we have to do in each case is talk to the knowledge keepers, the elders of each of these groups, and say, how do you want to do this, right? And if you want to do like we did with Halifax Center and the Mi'kmaq, and produce your own YouTube videos where you tell the story, hey, I'm in favor of that, we'll fund it. I mean, you know, that's exactly the way we'd like to see it happen, because I can't tell you your story. It's not my life. I haven't lived it. It's yours, and it's yours to tell. But there are many cultures out there where you can't point to anyone in that culture and say, that's the person in charge of that. And nobody has taken charge of their language, their culture, or their sky. And so in the meantime, we're doing the best job we can as caretakers to guard this information until someone comes along, like the Inuit have now with John McDonald's work, and said, you know what, it's time for us to take that and make it ours. And that's exactly what we want. So.
Kareem, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does to some degree. I think part of it is how we frame it
Yes.
within our resources. I'll tell you, I worry when I hear we're the caretakers, that's our it's a self-appointed role. It's not something that's been given to us. And so my worry is cultural misappropriation by taking this knowledge and trying to store it for eventually putting it back into the hands. I worry about that. And that's something that we can discuss offline, but it's one of those things where whenever I've had these discussions with First Nations, with Métis, and I've sat down with them, it's a constant issue for them, this idea that we should do something to help them. It's empowering them to do something themselves, or ensuring that they know that we're there to help if they want it.
Yeah, this is what this two-eyed seeing approach is. It's reconciliation. It's a partnership, okay? It's not us doing it for them, it's doing it with them. And that's what we're trying to do here. I hear you. I definitely appreciate everything that you're saying there, and that Eric was saying in the chat. I get that, and it's different for each group. Exactly. They're all different cultures. So,
and thank you, Roland, for the clarification in the chat as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that conversation here as opposed to offline, because it is very important. And when we saw, you know, the e-store, the Rask e-store selling the native Star Wheel product, we realized that here in southern Alberta, that there were Blackfoot culture that wasn't being represented there. And before we reached out to anybody else, we reached out to Dr. Annette Lee, the principal creator of that Star Wheel, and asked if it was all right if we were to proceed collecting information to add more cultural background to her product, that we would be adding content that would be used in concert with her product. So that was the very first thing we did, to see, you know, let's make sure we're doing this the right way, step by step, respecting the cultures that we're anticipating that we want to work with. So we did that first. We had earlier this month, Judy Sterner of the I&D committee and myself met with Dr. Robert Cardinal and other folks with the Indigenous team, together with our own Lisa DeFito. Work on the aspects of the Blackfoot cultural project that Dr. Cardinal was already working on, and that we were hoping to assist with labor and with perhaps some funds. And that's why Lisa DeVito from our national office was in that conversation. And so we're doing this very systematically to make sure that we're not driving this process, but we are helping in the process that is already occurring.
Thanks, Roland. Alendria, you have a question.
Hey, it's actually not a question.
Okay.
it's just a point I was going to add, if it's okay with Charles. I've also, for those who don't know, I'm Alendria. I'm the editor-in-chief of Sky News. And so we've been publishing some articles related to the World Asterisms Project. I actually spoke with John McDonald a little while ago. And I don't mean to put words in anybody's mouths or like, but you know, as a journalist, you often just repeat what other people say. You don't say anything yourself. So, but one of the things that John McDonald said is that before he took on the project of kind of looking at the Inuit skies, the community that he was working with basically had a council of elders who got together and decided whether or not he could record them. And so in the end, they decided that he could do it. He told me too that they asked that he publish in English so that other people outside of their community could see it. And so this, I can't vouch for all, you said 800 different cultures, right? But I think steps are being made and with the researchers, right? Like the people who are researching this information to ensure that it's done in a way that is like the communities are involved in the process.
Yeah, I'm going to share with you what Dr. Shane Pete from the Salish said. He said, you know what, if you talk to the elders, the older members of my community, they want this to be out there because that's how they preserved it. They pass it on from one generation to the next. It's primarily the younger people who are concerned about this because of all of the negative experiences, the horrible experiences they've had, and it's understandable. But you know, we're doing our best to be respectful and do this properly and with their permission. So now it looks like we're going to have to wrap this up because we only got 5 minutes left. But if you have any other questions, do contact me. I'd be happy to help you out. No problem at all. Thank you for giving me the time to do this.
Thank you, Charles. We've had some great comments in the chat to thank you for all the work you've done, and I'm hoping people will reach out to Charles and actually be part of the project and put their own information in as they can. So I think we will stop this at this point, and you can have a little bit of a break before moving into the next section. You can stay in this part of the grouping, or you can move over to another group that will be starting at an 11 o'clock, sorry, my 11 o'clock, your 2 o'clock Eastern program. So we'll let you do that. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.